Thousands of years after their marble temples crumbled, the gods of ancient Greece are still holding court. You can find them presiding over our modern legal system, built right into the architecture of our courthouses and civic institutions. How did a dead religion, one built around deeply flawed, petty, and often cruel deities, manage to achieve cultural immortality? To trace the survival of these stories, we have to rewind past the heroes and the marble altars, all the way back to a time before the gods even existed, to the very first age of the cosmos. In the Greek tradition, chaos was a yawning void, a gaping nothingness without form or direction. It was neither good nor evil. It simply was. From that ancient nothingness came the first physical truths: Gaia, the earth, and Uranus, the sky. Together, they formed the cosmos's first great pair, producing the Titans, 12 massive beings who ruled long before Zeus. Uranus trembled at his offspring, seeing their strength as a threat to his dominion. He forced his children back into Gaia's womb, sealing them beneath layers of rock where no light reached. Gaia fashioned a flint sickle and begged her sons for help. Only Cronus stepped forward. He dethroned his father, but Uranus left a curse that Cronus, too, would be overthrown by his own blood. Cronus responded by swallowing his children as they were born, hiding them within his belly to protect his throne. After losing 5 children, Rhea smuggled her 6th child, Zeus, to a mountain cave. Raised in secret, Zeus eventually returned and forced Cronus to vomit up his fully grown siblings. This ignited a 10-year war between the Titans and these new Olympians, a conflict that split the earth to its core. The first 2 ages of the world were defined by this rhythm of birth and betrayal. To end the reign of the Titans, the Sky Throne required a ruler who could do more than win a war. It required someone who could rewrite the rules of power. Zeus claimed the heavens by fate and force, but his first act as king was one of strategic division. He cast lots with his brothers, assigning the sea to Poseidon and the underworld to Hades, ensuring no single god held total dominion over the others from their seats on Mount Olympus. But even these triumphant Olympians were not supreme creators. They were subject to Moira, the Greek concept of fate. Fate was an invisible, inescapable force woven into the bones of the universe, and it dictated that even Zeus could not alter destiny. These deities were powerful, but they were also flawed, anxious, and deeply entangled in their own rivalries. While the gods divided their kingdoms, a titan named Prometheus took pity on a new, defenseless creation, mankind. Defying Zeus's orders, Prometheus stole a flame from the divine forge and carried it down to humanity. With that single spark came warmth, metalwork, and the ability to build a world independent of the gods. This introduction of fire created a volatile new dynamic. The gods could no longer ignore the mortal realm. They began descending to Earth to interfere in human wars, punish perceived arrogance, and sire children who would carry their divine blood into the mud. This intermingling produced a generation unlike any before or since, the demigods. This was the heroic age, a violent era where men born of divine blood and mortal wombs possessed impossible strength while remaining bound by mortal vulnerability. Figures like Perseus, who founded dynasties by slaying the Gorgon, and Theseus, who unified the region of Attica. Most prominent was Heracles, whose 12 labors were born from his own suffering and divine madness. Their deeds built the foundations of the first human cities. The climax of this era arrived with the Trojan War. It started with a golden apple and a divine beauty contest, but it was locked into place by human pride and the sacred oaths of kings. When Paris took Helen to Troy, the entire Greek world sailed to retrieve her, beginning a decade of slaughter. For 10 years, the armies bared each other beneath the walls of Ilium, while the Olympians watched from the sidelines. Gods deflected spears, guided arrows, and directly influenced the blood spilled on the battlefield, turning human soldiers into instruments for their own celestial grudges. When Troy finally fell, there was no glorious victory. The greatest warriors, like Achilles and Hector, were dead. The survivors faced years of cursed wandering, or returned to find their kingdoms in ruins. the age of heroes had bled itself dry. The burning of Troy left the heroic bloodlines exhausted, and the survivors scattered across a world they no longer controlled. In the years that followed, the Olympians began a slow retreat into the background of mortal life. We currently live in what the ancient poet Hesiod called the Iron Age, a time of distance from the divine. As Greek city-states developed advanced civic structures, human philosophy began to replace literal belief. Thinkers like Plato and Epicurus questioned the logic of worshipping jealous, bickering deities who mirrored human failures. When the Roman Empire expanded, they adopted the Greek pantheon, but transformed them into calculated political symbols. Zeus became Jupiter, the lawgiver. Ares became Mars, the disciplined soldier. The gods were no longer wild, elemental forces, but representations of Roman civic and military order. The rise of Christianity delivered the final blow to the old rites. Offering a single, omnipotent creator, this new faith steadily displaced the old rituals. By the end of the 4th century, the Roman state officially outlawed pagan sacrifices and closed the ancient temples. The marble altars went cold. Physical worship was eradicated, but the narrative infrastructure of the myths was already too deeply embedded in humanity to be destroyed. The gods were gone, but their stories were everywhere. Medieval scholars preserved the ancient texts, but during the Renaissance, these stories transitioned from hidden manuscripts to the center of European culture. The gods returned as the primary subjects for a new era of painters and sculptors who used the old myths to explore the depth of human emotion. By the 20th century, modern psychology reframed these figures as archetypes, eternal, recurring patterns buried within the human subconscious. We realized we didn't just tell these stories, we were built out of them. Today, those exact same archetypes stalk the pages of comic books and light up movie screens. We still use the tragedy of Oedipus, the wandering of Odysseus, and the burden of Heracles to understand hubris, fate, and the reality of human struggle. The Greek gods didn't outlast their own temples because they were perfect moral compasses. They achieved immortality because they were profoundly flawed. In their jealousy, their grief, and their struggle against fate, they provided an unbreakable mirror for our own lives.